Hello, I hope autumn rain won't spoil this video and I won't have to re-record it, because today I want to tell you about the next model in the series of newly announced in-ear monitors by CCA and KZ, and it's their hybrid flagship ZAX. Probably it's the highest flagship in the company's lineup up to date. Of course, there is pure balanced armature models like AS16, but AS16 is a step aside from their traditional sound, so I don't consider it as a typical KZ model. And also, of course, there are two new pure balanced armatures coming, ASX and something else, I don't remember this three letters abbreviation. So probably, you know, ZAX will be the most discussed and most interesting, most hyped model, at least in the near future. ASX and the second model is also interesting, but they are not yet, they are just started shipping, so we'll have about a week or two before the start of interest to them. So it's the 8 drivers per side in-ear monitors. It's hybrid. Here used dynamic driver. It's 10mm with peak diaphragm, so it's new drivers used by KZ, and 7 balanced armatures, also retuned sound. Price is about $60. It's a noticeable step forward from their current hybrid flagship ZSX. But actually ZSX started at about $50 or so, but then was discounted. In like few months probably ZAX will also follow this way. But currently it's available for $60. I will add links to the Linsol shop in the description, and let's have a closer look. In terms of package, they start using this black cardboard box. Looks probably more fancy than their typical matchbox one. I've got version with microphone and I got silver one. There is also nice black version, and consensus is that black version looks more stylish, but this one is also pretty nice. Inside there is a metal plate and earpieces themselves, so it's KZ approach to premium packaging. Buyer will get earpieces, 2 additional pair of tips and stock cable, and warranty card with manual. You know, I think that nowadays KZ could definitely add few additional pair of tips. The best-selling company actually can start their own line of tips. In terms of the design, they are nice. Looks stylish. It's same design that we've seen before, plastic inner part and metal plate on the faceplate, but now it's zinc alloy with grooves. Looks pretty stylish, and actually through these grooves you can see the internals of the shell itself. I'm not sure is this model open, because it seems to me that the dynamic driver is actually isolated. It has a small vent hole, but it's not opening to this big space inside of earpiece. But it's just my assumptions and speculations, so I'm not sure what acoustic design used here, but actually sound isolation is about average. That's why I dubbed that they are so open. But anyway, this part looks pretty attractive. And it's also really comfortable, because this shape of the shell is polished by many years. It's commonly used, and it's fitting well to vast majority of ears. They have good long spout, so they fit nicely into ears, so most probably there won't be issues with fit. Of course, there could be some rare exceptions, but I don't think that they will be really often. So through the transparent shell you can see the drivers, you can count them. There are a lot of them here and there, placing 7 balanced armatures inside, even using double. Some of them probably are double balanced armatures. It's still pretty complicated task, but they managed to accomplish it, and internals looks pretty well built. Same applies to this metal spout. There is a grill for protection, lip for holding the tip, so all parts of modern in-ear monitors design is here. They're holding tips pretty well. Tips are traditional KZ1 with small grooves, and actually pretty attractive and stylish, and for $60 it's more than great. And finally, I noticed that in the previous CCA C10 Pro review, but also here, they decided to use a bit different cable. It's not some audiophiliac option, just a bit more modern design. Now it's silver one and looks transparent, so it's good, but of course not even close into some high-end cables in terms of materials, and so just a basic wire. There is an ear hooks format, no memory wire inside unfortunately, but cable itself average in terms of softness, not super stiff, not super soft, something in between. Microphone quality is average. If you move it closer to your mouth it will be okay, but not more than that. But button is pretty nice and clicky, so they improved that, so button feels more tactile and more pleasant. It's accurately braided, not getting hard when it's cold outside. Goes way down to this silicone splitter, actually not silicone, for some harder plastic. And then goes to the KZ typical angle jack, so it's probably the same plant, same press forms, but just a bit different materials. Anyway, in terms of design, in terms of build, in terms of packaging, so of course accessory set is pretty poor, but anyway, buying this model you can spend like $10 for additional tips, but of course it would be nice to see more. Anyway, design is good, stock cable is nice, wearing comfort and build quality are really good. And of course about the sound, so I gave them about 60 hours of burn-in, they didn't change sound much, so don't bother spending time burning them in. Better find some well-fitting tips, maybe some third-party tips you can use with them, but actually for me this black one's stock biggest was okay. Let's have some player on the table, and you know, not surprisingly this time I decided to use SP2000 as a player to show the examples, because you know KZ improving their sound, maybe not by huge steps, but constantly and unavoidably probably. You know, comparing, remembering KZ models like 5 that were released like 5 years ago, and this one, it's definitely night and day difference. And actually, if I was some in-ear monitors manufacturer, I would probably be a bit stressed, because KZ and other Hi-Fi brands from the affordable segment, they starting moving toward the higher segment and apply the pressure toward that higher segment, and ZAX is a good example of pretty well tuned in-ear monitors. And you know, probably they reached the level that can be considered as enough for vast majority of listeners. Of course, not for not audiophiles, probably, let's say so. For mass market, for vast majority, even for those of listeners, even for those who like to get the high sound quality, ZAX or some other KZ or TRN, let's name some other manufacturers, I don't know, Shozi, KB Ear and other guys, they producing, you know, really good sound quality. And if we consider the price quality ratios, they can easily be considered as a winners, because in the more expensive segment you just paying for absolutely best sound, but there is a law of diminishing returns, and the more you the higher is the segment, the more you have to pay for the smaller improvements in sound quality. Anyway, enough of talks, let's go back to their sound. It's a V-shaped signature with accented low frequencies and treble, but it's really technical, and you know, I didn't search for the ZSX and ZAX frequency response charts, but probably they will be really close, maybe not really close, they will be close, because it's like not totally opposite models. But you know, it's the case when you can hear the technical difference. But about the comparisons I will talk a bit later. So bass is accented, it's but accent isn't big, so probably gone are the times when KZ were making in-ear monitors that have only bass. It's, you know, it's really moderate low frequency accent. It's enough to give additional body, to give additional weight, but at the same time its bass is pretty well controlled and stays in place. Resolution is nice, maybe it's, you know, it's not some balanced armatures and not as good as some expensive models, but in this price range for dynamic drivers it's one of the best models. It has good depth and it's punchy, impactful, but at the same time it's sounding not too dry, and it makes the low frequencies here is pretty universal. They are not for those who like, you know, additional weight, for those who like that big body bass. It's more for those who prefer more natural representation, but it's enough, at least to my taste, even for electronic music, for genres where you need deep and impactful bass. But of course, if your main preference is some electronic music and you like big bass, probably you need more bassy model. But if you listen for some acoustic instruments, if you prefer resolution and texturing and technical stuff and overtone saturation, it's definitely a good choice. But I highlight that once again, for me, for electronic music, they are also nice because of good depth, and what is even more important is they have good control, and actually its control is better than in ZSX, and the bass stays in place, not shadowing the mids. But let's see what I've got. For example, it's Casey Abrams, good album Put a Spell on You, and Cougartown. So nice acoustic bass part here, and this in-ear monitor sounding really juicy with this acoustic bass, and actually really good representation. Mids are a bit recessed, but there is no that sense of recessed mids, because here they have 7 balanced armatures and it's enough to create a balanced sound. So they are detailed, but not going into nitpicking or too dry to monitoring sound. It's not the model that created to show the tiniest, smallest nuances of music. They have more musical representation. If you need something super resolving, it's like Alpha and Delta D6 or KZ AS16 or some teen hi-fi models and so on. Anyway, it's really well balanced mids, like resolving but not too much. Yeah, there could be too much resolution, I'm not kidding here. And at the same time they have a good weight, but not trying to be super weighty. They're not trying to highlight something. A bit highlighting emotions and macro dynamics, so not absolutely neutral, shifting towards a bit of towards emotional representation, but it's sounding pretty organic and fun. So they prefer fun over neutral. And of course they are not super nitpicking in terms of record quality, but better material would be a plus for them. Imaginary stage is good, noticeably above average, of course not flagship level, but noticeably above average, so good 3-dimensional staging in both dimensions. But of course it's also a subjective thing. And as an example, I've got King Crimson, Moonchild. Usually I use such tracks as an examples for more expensive and high-end models. And of course ZAX isn't the in-ear monitors that 100% suited for this track, because it's complicated, it requires something from the mid segment to fully unveil the track. But actually, you know, despite of lacking some technicality, ZAX sounding really good with this track. It's enjoyable and sounding pretty realistic and really good. All that flute part at the beginning and guitar, vocal sounding pretty natural. And treble is accented, so it's a plus and a minus at the same time. The amount of accent is probably close to ZSX, not 100% same, maybe a bit bigger, but just a tiny bit. So anyway, if you treble sensitive, it's better to listen this model before buying, because they're not trying to hide the treble. They have really normal extension, slightly above average, but actually for this price range and for the affordable models it's good. And it's a typical nice balanced armatures treble. Clean, crisp, with airness. Layering is basic, but overtone saturation is pretty nice. And as an example of treble, I got the Opeth Pale Communion album and track Elysian Woes, or Woes, as some say. This track should be named The Michael That Refused to Scream. But anyway, it's probably unavoidable and irreversible change in the Opeth style, because they definitely went into the progressive side and left their brutal parts in the past, and actually it's good. And as the joke says, that this album is really close to the Steven Wilson's solo works. Really good, nice airy percussions, nice vocal with a lot of overtones, and all of that requires treble. And this in-ear monitors not perfectly, but also pretty well represent this track. So to summarize everything, it's slightly V-shaped signature, but pretty technical, sounding clean, crisp, and at the same time with good emotions and pretty well controlled punchy low frequencies. In terms of pairing, you can use them of course with smartphones or with some tablets, but of course to get the full potential you need some player, probably up to middle segment, but the best pairings are Heidi's AP80 Pro, Hybe R3 Pro, FIO M6 and so on. Also, it's a really good candidate to be turned into the true wireless model using the TRN's adapters, for example. Speaking about the comparisons, there are tons of models in this price range, and of course I can't compare them all, so just basically few models and few conclusions. So ZSX I already mentioned, but this one is more technical and pretty more a bit more natural sounding. So if you already own ZSX, probably there is not much sense in selling them and instantly buying this model, but if you have a chance to do so, it's a nice option. Don't expect like huge step forward in terms of performance, but difference is present. And if you considering buying new model, probably, you know, spending additional $20, at least at my scale, is worth that. But of course, if this $20 is a big amount of money for you, ZSX is also really decent model, and they didn't become worse because there is a better model now. Recently released CCA C16, well, C16 is like more warm on the mids, more fine-tuned, so it's like more taste-based. This one is more technical and more resolving. And C10 Pro actually close in terms of signature, but they have a bit less resolution, especially it's noticeable on the low frequencies. Probably here used some different dynamic driver, but it's just my assumption because lows here are better controlled. And this one has more organic treble. Difference once again is not big, but it's audible. And let's say TRN TRN V90, it's differently tuned. They are more forward, a bit more aggressive, more neutral, so it's different sound representation. And Teen Hi-Fi, for example, T2 Pro, they are a bit warmer on mids, they are not balanced armatures, it's just a dynamic driver. They are a bit more coherent because they don't have to join so many drivers, but this one is a bit more resolving if you need more resolution, but T2 Plus is for those who need a bit more warmth and organic representation. Okay, so there are tons and tons more models, but I can't recall them, so I think few models that I've mentioned will be enough as a reference points. It was KZ ZAX, pretty good option, so thank you for listening, thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.